Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Backstage Bikini podcast with your host, Grace and Jade. And on today's episode, we have a very, very special guest and a guest close to my heart. We've got Calum Raistrick. He is the leading prep coach in the UK, if not Europe and the world, the founder of Team Pro Coach, and obviously my original prep coach, the coach that made me the athlete I am today. So, Calum, welcome onto the podcast. How are you doing?
Hell of an introduction. Thank you very much. I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Amazing, amazing. I think obviously I've been working with you for 3 years, but you had taught me so much, not just about bodybuilding, but the mental side of things so much. And I'm not the most calmest of individuals. I'm a massive stress edge. I talk about it on the podcast all the time. Huge self-doubt. So I guess we wanted to get you on to speak all about that aspect of things and being an athlete and dealing with self-doubt and the psychological barriers that we all experience. And with you being such a high level coach, coaching pros who go through those things themselves, and I suppose just make listeners realize that they're not alone in that aspect as well.
For
Yeah,
sure, yeah.
There's a danger, I think, of just thinking that any athletes at that level, and especially you, Cal, you have such an array of athletes and have done over the years. You have everybody from sort of amateur straight through to Olympia qualified athletes in terms of dealing with those mindsets. So sort of to break down, and we'll start from the beginning. Do you want to introduce yourself, where you've come from, what your career's been like, and what you're doing right now, just so that listeners, if they've been living under a rock, don't know who you are?
Yeah, for sure. So I started like the early 2000. I think it was 2003, 2012 maybe was the first time that I started working in a gym straight out of university, and I just did the conventional personal training for 5-6 years. The turning point for me was working out of M10 in Nottingham, where it kind of went from coaching like the wider public in every route of life to coaching specifically from a physique perspective. And then the online side grew alongside, and then we started the Muscle Mentals, where it all started. I think, Grace, like you were Muscle Mental for a couple of years.
Lockdown days. All we could do.
that container that you had with all that kit in.
Yeah.
And that's where the online side grew in. I didn't really start like specifically just coaching competitors probably until 2018, 2019. I did a prep myself in 2019. After that prep I did myself, it started to pick up more, and then I got a few really good wins and the first couple of pro cards in that 2019-2020 season, and then it's just kind of just built from there and skyrocketed. So we now have a team of 7 plus me, 7 as of yesterday. And obviously Ross is within the prep team with me, and the boys are absolutely killing it. So the big thing for us is, I think for me, coaching wise, like both my parents are teachers, and that was probably like subconsciously heavily drilled into me since I was young, whether I was aware of it or not. And there was also a large exposure to like team sports when I was younger as well. I wasn't particularly good at anything, but my dad and my brother were very, very good at rugby, played at a really high level. So I was kind of exposed to that environment and the camaraderie with that, and the kind of relationships and environment that built. So I think being personable comes quite easily to me in terms of building relationships with people and building trust. And I think that's a massive part of from a coaching perspective. And one little thing that I'll say there is, something that has come across multiple times when I've been working with people who might have been new athletes who are working with, coaches all over the world, but at a very, very high level and top level pros. One of the first things I'll say after the first couple of weeks is how different it is to feel relaxed about them telling me stuff or being open about things that are going on in their lives, or how it's been a massive reduction in stress because they can talk openly. And it makes you think, like, even at that top level, from the amateurs all the way up until the Olympia stage, all those guys and girls are going through the exact same challenges and the exact same psychological challenges and burdens across all multiple levels, from grassroots all the way up into the top level. The only difference is the majority of the people that are at the top level have just been doing it for a longer period of time. So like if you looked at Grace when we first started working together, some of that self-doubt was crippling, right? But obviously the more preps that you did and the more off seasons that you did and the more you worked on yourself and the more you reviewed that, the stronger you get at managing it in the first place and bulletproofing that. And it will never go. I'm a firm believer in the fact that, but I bet, before Chris Bumstead goes out on stage or before, anyone at that Olympia goes out on stage, even if they won it 3 or 4 times, they're still going to get the same little hesitation in the back of their mind thinking, what happens if somebody does beat me? What happens if I'm not as good as I was last year? It's very rare to see someone that is 100% cold-hearted, killer instinct. And even I can say this definitively, even the people that show that online are not like that behind closed doors in person.
Yeah, I agree. But like the quote is thrown around all the time: pressure is a privilege. And
yeah.
I tell myself that over and over and over on prep, but I feel like sometimes it's like a curve in your competing journey where it's like, okay, there's not that much pressure, and then you go for something big and then you might get your pro card or your win, and then it kind of goes back down. But I did find last year really, really challenging, but I suppose that quote always stands in my brain. I see people say it all the time. But do you ever think that like that pressure is almost too much, that like it's not actually a benefit, that it's gone so far beyond the pressure that it actually cripples you so much and beyond repair almost? And for you as a coach as well, kind of handling that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there, and it's self-perpetuated in the degree that we live in this like externalized world of social media where this becomes one of the most crippling things in a prep or an off season. And if we remove that and we just look at the pressure that you put on yourself just to achieve and be your best self, that removes half of the equation. Like, I think you'll probably agree with this, Grace, as well. One of the most daunting factors that an athlete will do right now in this day and age, who have a social media following, is it's not the result, it's telling your Instagram followers how you've done. So if you haven't won, you're going on and saying, I came second, or I came third, and I told all these people I was going for a pro card. I told you in Italy, Grace, if you're consistently getting in that top 3 at the highest level as an amateur, you're exactly where you need to be, because you can't get to the top unless you've done that for a long period of time and you've consistently placed in that environment for a long period of time. It might not be first every single time, but that's completely out of your control, but you're in the mix constantly. But the thing that you were thinking about was, how silly am I going to look to all my followers now that I haven't won? Well, all of that is completely irrelevant. So like, the pressure is a privilege. It needs to be, the pressure situation needs to be brought back to, it's just the expectation that you set yourself because you want to be a high achiever. It's completely irrelevant what anyone else thinks. And the people that can grasp that and just keep their own environment, their coach, their close friends, their partner, their training partner, whatever it might be, those are the people, those are the opinions that matter to me, and those are the voices that I'm going to hear. Nothing else matters. And the other opinions, it's just noise that you block out. It's irrelevant. And if you remove that equation, there's a significant amount of burden that's removed, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah. I think as a coach yourself, Cal, though, like the names that you have on the team, like there must be an element of pressure that you experience as a coach as well, given their social media following. That for a lot of them it is their job, and the influencing is a part of their job, and a loss to them might be seen as like a failure. They're letting their followers down, so that kind of is put on you then. So how do you manage that side of things, or you just kind of brush it over, you don't really care?
You get better over time. Maybe 2 years ago it was a little bit different. I think I've exposed myself in the deep end long enough now to numb myself to that to an extent. I've got better at, and people say this all the time, but I can definitively say that it does make me tick, where the higher the pressure, the higher I kind of set myself in terms of like, if the task is here, then I'll meet that here. And for me, if I know that, right, there's this amount of pressure and there's this amount of expectation, I've got the reassurance that, well, that's making me a better coach, and that's making me a push forwards and progress. So I kind of thrive off it now. But at the start, it's very daunting when you think about it too much. But I think as a coach, you're so invested in the day-to-day check-ins and what's happening in that individual process that there might be the night before stage where you have a little think and you overthink things, but apart from that, you're so engrossed in the process that you don't really even think about it.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about it just before we came on, weren't we, Grace, about that sort of perpetuation. Like, you have a job to do, that's absolutely fine as a coach, and you have an athlete and you're going to make decisions. Have you ever come up against athletes sort of pushing against those decisions, Calum? And how do you deal with that pressure in the moment? Because obviously when self-doubt's perpetuating, when somebody's been sat on Instagram, Googling or searching for all of the people that they're likely going to be up against, they've already got a preconceived placement in their mind, and then they start panicking and say, no, we need to come in leaner, or we need to do this. Like, where do you sit, and how do you manage the client at that point, and then manage your own choices? Is that just a case of repetition, or is it something that you consciously have to do even at this level now?
You do. There is definitely part of that. It's managing that kind of pressure pot, so to speak. And I think the closer you get to the event, the closer you get to the show, the more blinkers on you have to be in terms of looking at what's relevant and valuable to focus on, and looking at what's irrelevant and invaluable to focus on. I think the more experience the athlete gets, the better they get at that. And also understanding, one thing you need to tell yourself, if this is a first-timer competitor doing the first show they've ever done in a completely new environment, they're probably not going to have many expectations anyway. So it's almost like a bit of a fun factor. And like, right, it's exciting, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. The more you do this, the more of an expectation you set. But you just got to appreciate the fact that if there's anybody that's trying to be a high achiever as an athlete in this sport, you should expect everybody that you're coming up and competing against to be at the highest level. So you don't need to worry about it, because right, well, if I'm going to turn pro, if I'm going to qualify for the Olympia, the environments that I'm going to achieve that in are the best of the best in the world. So I'm not going to come up against the weak lineup. So it's irrelevant for me to think that, because I'm prepping and preparing myself in a manner where I need to be ready for that level, and that will push you forward as an athlete. You just need to be very, very objective in that situation and look at the higher valuable variables of focus, and just obsess and fixate on those variables in the final few stages. And little things like if you know a client is spending too much time on social media and looking at the event lineup and looking at who's signed up and looking at their Instagram pages, just back off the exposure that's there, and just focus on your own individual process. Grace, you would have been the exact same. Like, when you're leading up to a show, you post and ghost, I call it, where it's like you do your content, you produce, you create, and then you try and not consume, because you've just got to focus on just managing what's up here and just focusing on the most important variables.
Yeah, absolutely. I even said to myself this last week, I was like, if I prep again, I don't even think I'll do Jasmine Jeffrey on it, and probably just not say anything. And it's like, okay, as a coach, it's really difficult to do that, because it is part of your job, sharing the journey, but you need to protect your head in most cases, and if you feel like you're going for something bigger, you just need to do that, for your best interest. But I suppose kind of stripping it back and going back to what I suppose you've been known for the last couple of years is getting pro cards left, right and center. And I think with that, with the rise in you, like it's just become more and more common with people. I feel like now there's more pro cards than ever in the UK. Am I right or am I wrong? Or just in Europe in general. Yeah. So you're seeing left, right and center, road to pro, this and that and the other. And I'd say you've got consultations just nonstop of people saying they want to turn pro. And it's like, how would you manage the headspace of these people where they want it yesterday, and they don't really realize the level of work that might need to go into it? Like, how do you kind of feed that to them? Or are you just kind of totally straight up?
So I think there's a lot of times where I'll have consulted with people and had conversations with people that will be very fixated on turning pro, where, you can see them and be like, look, this is not going to be a 12 to 18 month thing. It can happen for sure, because I've seen wild transformations of people going from X to Y and having drastic change in a short time frame. But the biggest thing is, it's not dismissing it. It's just focusing on the process to get there in the first place, and looking at the day to day as opposed to the bigger picture. Like, the term "I want to turn pro," or I want to turn pro at this show, or whatever it might be, in this year, this season. Just look at the components that need to happen for that to become a reality. And the more you can fixate on the process, and the more you can fixate on the actual variables that are going to make you a better athlete, it happens as a byproduct of those things. Whereas, you know, I put up a reel the other day where it was like the people that focus on the journey itself as opposed to the end destination are the people that typically stay in the sport the longest and do the best, because by focusing on the journey and the kind of walk, so to speak, to the end destination, it just makes you a better athlete, and it sorts this out as well. Whereas if you're constantly thinking, I'm doing a pro qualifier on this day, I've got to turn pro, you can't control that. All you can control is how you deliver your individual best. And if it's right on the day and they reward it, sweet. If it's not, you go and do it again, and eventually it will eventually pay off. Like Hader in 2020, is it 2020? 2021, sorry. We went to 5 consecutive countries in like 8 weeks. And he turned pro on the 5th one, which was the last show we could have turned pro at for that year. And that to the point where that the pressure in Denmark was crippling in terms of like, it's make or break now. And if I don't do it, it's going to be another year until I can have another go. But for him, all he focused on in that time frame, and Hader was dreadful for this. He was the one that was checking people out backstage. He was the one that was on his Instagram. But every time he exposed himself to that environment, you just had to take him back to that controlled, collected, calm place of just focus on the job at hand, put your headphones in, go and sit in the corner, spend time in your own mind and just visualize what you want. And then just focus on being your best individual self. And if that's right on the day, sweet. If it's not, it was still better than last week and you're still closer to the target. And you just got to go and repeat that.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, you are absolutely right. The whole road to pro hashtag and stuff like that. You know, you've got to appreciate the fact that all you can focus on is just delivering better each time, and eventually that door is going to open for a lot of people. It might not ever open, but then it's like,
I think the road to pro needs to be removed, and I just call it now road to better, because it's like
road to better,
the road to pro in itself, like that's putting pressure on yourself before you even started a prep. Like, hell, start winning, you know, first and overalls, and then come back to me and say you're doing road to pro. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But it's the road part, isn't it? That's the bit that everybody's missing. The pro card, ultimately that's just the destination. And like you said, Cal, like if you concentrate on being on the road, in the journey, doing what you need to be doing, that's the bit that does the transforming, and that's the bit that gets you there. Do you see that there's an increased sort of mindset, I don't know, an approach from athletes, even at a bikini level, entering the sport quite early on? Is that more of a goal out of the gate as opposed to what, like a couple of years ago, when it was more about, well, it was less exposure, I suppose, for bodybuilding? So do you see that has that increased?
I think the only difference is now the accessibility to turning pro is more prevalent than ever. Like if you look back to the UK BFF days, like there was 1 pro card a year in the UK, whereas now you can travel anywhere in the world and turn pro, you know, every other week in Europe or US, or 3 times a year in the UK. Amateur Olympias, there's 3 pro cards. In America, there's, you know, at the Nationals of USA, there's 2 pro cards per class. So there's 40 pro cards given out in one show. So for that, you know, you're getting a lot of those competitors that don't really understand the sport, don't really understand how they're going to have to apply themselves and what they're going to have to sacrifice and how they're going to have to commit themselves to get to the top level. And they're just seeing their favorite influencer turn pro, or they're just seeing X and Y at a pro qualifier, and they're like, well, I want to do that. But then they spend some time in that environment and they realize, oh, hang on a minute, this is going to take some time, this is going to take some effort. And, you know, some people will then quit, some people will stay in the sport and stay there for a while. I think it's just the amount that it's plastered on social media now, because more people are vlogging and documenting their own journeys and stuff. And it's also the accessibility to have an opportunity to turn pro. There is way more, but it's, you know, 9 times out of 10, it's still just as challenging to actually get there in the first place.
Absolutely. I think back to like my first prep all the time, and I had no idea what a pro card even was. And it's probably like the best prep I've ever
Same.
I'm like, I had no idea. Like, I didn't even know what the prize was at the end. I was like, I just did it because I loved it. And like, everybody needs to go into that, and then whatever comes. And like what Marnie always said last weekend is like, if the stars align, you know, when she just kept going, and then it came, you know. So I think just removing that entirely can make the process so much more enjoyable, you know.
Yeah. I think the approach there of like you're competing because you love to compete, and you're competing because it's in your nature and in your character, and you're getting a lot of fulfillment out of that. That's the individual that will go and do really great things in the sport, because they're going to be able to do it for a long period of time at their absolute best. If you're competing just for the accolades of turning pro, it's going to be a really hard challenge to actually uphold for a long period of time. And also just appreciate, for people that are listening, just because you turn pro, it changes nothing. You're still gonna have to work. You're still gonna have to do everything you're doing before. All you're going to be able to do is put IFBB Pro in your Instagram bio. That's literally the only thing.
This going back to the social media thing. It is potentially the gratification of it as well, and just that massive surge of dopamine when you get the pinnacle, you know. And same with the Olympia invite, and it's just like, but what's next? You know, you're still gonna get that massive high, and then you're gonna go back down, and then you're gonna be at the bottom of the pile, you know, and then you're gonna be riddled with self-doubt again. So it's just interesting to talk about it. But I suppose, with so much experience, Cal, what would you say is the most common psychological barrier amongst your clients?
I think, well, there's two variables. One of them is this self-perpetuated pressure that will eventually lead people to probably making emotionally led decisions that aren't the best thing to do. Whether that is, you know, overdoing output, under eating, you know, misinforming in terms of communication with a coach, just the impact that stress will have in general on sleep and everything else cascading from that within prep. It can be a really limiting factor. And then also just the actual ability for, and this is the balancing act, because it's like the contrary to the other one, but the ability to have like genuine self-belief and the ability to back yourself in those environments. Not back yourself, I have to win, but back yourself as, I'm going to be able to get better at every show I do, and I'm going to eventually continue to do that to the point where it is going to lead to the goals that I've set out to do. And like having a genuine reassurance to yourself that you have the confidence in your own ability. Because, you know, I'll always use the same analogy of like, if you like speaking things into existence and the capacity for thoughts to become things. Like, everyone that's ever turned pro is this hypothetical situation, but everyone that's ever turned pro has visualized that for a long time before it's happened. And it doesn't mean that you can't visualize it. It just means that you need to understand that this is a process orientated task that may take a long period of time, but just focus on the day to day is going to lead to the end goal. You know, Matt McCullough, who turned pro at the Ben Weider Classic Physique last weekend or 2 weeks ago, he had really crippling self-doubt, and he was like, almost in shock that he turned pro at that show. He was like, I never thought I'd do it the first time this year. You know, even last year when he was winning his class, he won the overall at the regional, lost out in the overall at the pro qualifier in Ireland. And that for him was like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'll try again next time. But there's still that factor in his head that's like, am I really good enough to do this? And then like, it's the most rewarding thing for me to see him on stage get rewarded, because it's like his face is like, oh my God, I've finally actually done it. I can do this. And you need those little badges on your shoulder to push you forwards in the right direction. But, you know, Corey's a perfect example at FIBO this weekend when he went to Germany, where arguably he probably should have, you know, it's a subjective sport, whatever, did really well, could have won that pro card in the overall, didn't. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's right. That's just confirmation that I'm in the right place. When Grace, you were in Italy, it's like, right, well, when you won the M-Pro show in Spain, it's like, I got into the overall, I won a massive class, I did well in that overall. It's just confirmation you're moving in the right direction. You don't get off that stage and beat yourself up that you didn't win, because it could happen multiple times. All you need to have is a confirmation that you've got first call out, you've got top 3, you've got top 2, you've won, you've gotten an overall. Now you've made it middle of the overall. You might not have won, but you're still in the middle. You're in the mix, and it's just progression. It's building momentum in a career as a bodybuilder, and that's all it is. Because you do that for a long enough period of time, and it is going to start paying off.
And I think from a psychological standpoint, you know, with that negative feedback and thing, I think it's really easy. We put so much in as bodybuilders. It's crippling when you get there and you've put everything that you've got, your blood, sweat, tears, soul, everything, to not get that placement that you potentially want. But as you say, that self-doubt will always be there to a degree, just because it's something that you care so passionately about. But have you ever come into a circumstance where that self-doubt has been that crippling, either for the athlete or for the sort of coach and athlete relationship, that it has done the opposite. It's not sort of progressed an athlete to greatness as such, but it's actually hindered them to the point where they're regressing or they've just quit. Has that ever happened?
I think the feedback thing that you just spoke about there, in terms of like, it's also important to point out, you can't judge a season by an individual placing. So like, even though you might have come third one week or not even placed, that next week you're in front of different eyes, you could win the overall. Like Nathan Stiles last year when we went to Austria came last in his supers class because they said he looked like women's wellness. And she was like, your ass is too big and your arms are too small. And then he went to Italy the week after and won the overall in 1 week. Okay, so it's irrelevant. Even if you don't place at one show, it's going to be a different judging panel. It's going to have different opinions. The support, the sport, although it is based on a criteria, is extremely subjective in that situation. So you've just got to keep turning up and keep getting better. And then the crippling factor of whether it's external or self-perpetuated pressure, I think if it is a situation where an athlete's regressing, they're either not communicating enough or they don't have the right people around them to nudge them in the right direction and put their arm around their shoulder when they need it, to give them a little bit of TLC when they need it. Because at the end of the day, like, it only takes one conversation for your clarity of your mind to reset and for you to go, actually, you're right, I'm going to have another couple of days where I feel really good. Then you might waver again. And then it's the same thing. Like Grace, when you're in prep, it will either be speaking to a friend, speaking to Ross, speaking to me, giving Rohan a cuddle, like little things where it's like, it sets you straight again. If you have enough days where you're in that negative mindset, it will start to unravel and implode. But you've just got to communicate and speak, whether it's with a friend, a partner, whatever it might be. Maybe you're using somebody to help you. Like I know that China, when she turned pro last year, we were at the regional in the same show that Ross did in Wigan, I think it was. And no joke, the one that she won, the overall that she won the first show, she turned around to me as she was pumping up backstage and said, "Cal, I've forgotten how to pose." And she was like in tears, like, "Cal, I've forgotten how to pose. What poses do I do? What do I do?" And I was like, the calm coach of like, right, I'm just going to do some figure poses in front of her.
I was actually only talking to China the other day because she's very similar, like kind of struggles mentally as me. And she was like, I said, no, I wasn't going to prep this year. And Cal told me I start prepping like 4 weeks. You look ridiculous trying to like, come on. But yeah, like you said, like sometimes you need that external influence. Like, yeah, you might have your coach, but I think it can be so valuable having another person. Like, would you refer out a lot, Cal, in that sense? Like if people need, I suppose, further mental support, whether it's with that kind of self-belief or even potentially someone's like relationship with food or relationship with yourself, all that kind of thing.
Look at any other top level sport. Look at any footballer, any golfer, any basketball player. 9 times out of 10, the people at the very top of the sport are going to be working with sports psychologists. They're going to be working with experts that they'll go and talk to on a frequent basis, because this being programmed is just as important as what the body's doing, because this is going to take the body forward. So 100%, like it's a massively valuable tool. Like China works with Rob Larty, I think. He's been really helpful, and I've seen that change in her as a person. It's massively valuable. So I think honestly, just for like readiness for an athlete to succeed over the long run, the like programming the mind and getting this in the right place is just as important as what you're doing with your nutrition and your training.
And I'd say, like, I would argue that bodybuilding is probably the most challenging things, like in terms of like how low your body fat gets. Like that is going to impact you mentally, but I suppose going back to what you said there, Cal, about kind of communicating when things get a little bit more challenging, is there ever a point where you said it there, like where a client might kind of go against what they're supposed to do? They might do more cardio, they might undereat, or even like on a prep, like overeating is quite common and more people are kind of speaking about it. But is there ever a point in prep where you as a coach are just like, no, this is kind of too far and we need to like stop this? Or do you sometimes not really find out until the end of prep, and it's like trying to manage those things then psychologically with the client? Like, how do you navigate that?
I think for for most like longer term clients, you kind of know if something's happened just in terms of how they're behaving, how they're communicating, how they're checking in. If something is a little bit more abnormal to what's the norm because they've been in a really rigid routine for a long period of time, and then they're suddenly not checking 2 days, it's like, right, well, something's up. I need to speak to them. And 9 times out of 10 in those situations, you have the rapport and the trust for them to just be honest. And then as a coach, you need to be empathetic to a point where it might be too much, and then you need to lay down the law a little bit. So it's like balancing the two there. Empathy's always got to be a part in it, but then you've also got to be the one that's driving the ship forwards, because it's like the captain of a boat. If the captain's like panicking as well, then all the crew members are going to be like, what the fuck's going on? The captain's got to take control of the ship and steer forwards at the end of the day. So it's having the balancing act there. The worst thing you can do, and you see this sometimes, and you sometimes see this with people that are new to you that might have left another coach, where it's like slamming down the hammer whenever anything happens. Like, this can't happen. This is not what you do. If you want to win, this is how it works. Most athletes will just shut off completely at that point, and you'll lose them. So like the balance between empathy and being the leader there is a really important task to manage. Sometimes 100%, like you will, maybe when the process is done, they'll then tell you, it's like, look, this is what I did 2 weeks out. I didn't tell you. I felt really guilty. I felt really embarrassed. And then at the end of the day, the thing's done at that point, and all you've got to do is understand why it happened and try and make better decisions next time, and try and let that lead to better outcomes. And also, as a result of that, not only from a progression standpoint, but the burden it will have on them psychologically. Like, there was one time in 2019 when I was in prep where I slipped up on my diet, and I was petrified to tell JP I slipped on my diet. I didn't tell him ever. He's probably not going to listen to this, but if you are, Jordan, I'm sorry. But like,
please listen to it. Come on, podcast.
I might send it in.
I didn't tell him, and I remember, like, for the next 5 days after that, I completely buried myself. Like, I dropped like 14 pounds in that 5 days after I did that, because my scale weight picked up. But like that, in my mind, for those 5 days was like crippling me, because I was just embarrassed. I was like guilty. I was embarrassed. I felt dreadful. And then it's like, it comes down to your self-worth as well, because it's like, well, I'm not good enough to stick to the plan. Like, I've not got the discipline and the willpower to do it. But if I were to be in a position where I would feel comfortable being like, look, I slipped up, what do you want me to do about it? I'm willing to do anything. It's letting that burden go straight away. And then you can think, objectively again, you can think critically. So that communication side is critical. But at the end of the day, that is part of coaching. You're going to have to deal with highs. You're going to have to deal with lows. You're going to have to deal with situations that they're going to find very uncomfortable. And your ability to manage that is going to be a really important aspect of the overall success of the journey.
Yeah. And from like that management standpoint as well, Cal, like I've had periods where sometimes I've needed the tough love, sometimes I've needed sitting down and saying, right, okay, you need to do more, you need to do X, Y, and Z if you want to be X, Y, and Z, versus other times in my sort of coaching journey where I've needed the empathy, like you said, and that element always has to kind of be there. But from a sort of coaching standpoint to an athlete, how do you read that? How do you know when you need to come in as hard perhaps as I've had it previously, and sort of managing that with an athlete, and obviously managing the fear, perhaps, because myself and Grace spoke about it, about actually sort of sending that athlete off in another direction in terms of communication. Where's the line, would you say?
Yeah, that's the part that you can't teach, really, isn't it? Like, that's the art of coaching. Like, you can be really technical as a coach, you can read all the textbooks, you can learn all the research papers, but at the end of the day, the ability to manage those situations are often the crux points of the success of the prep. And it's just understanding people and reading people and trying to build rapport at the start of that coaching process, so you can kind of understand their psyche and where they're at. If you know that you're going to have to come down on them hard in terms of, potentially asking them to do stuff that you're not comfortable asking them to do in terms of high output, low food, having the trust there for them to adhere to that, it's going to require more communication. It's going to require daily check-ins. It's going to require them to check in more frequently. It's going to require you to speak to them across the day. But once you've locked in that level of trust where it's like, look, I know, they know what they need to do. You know what they need to do. They understand it, and they trust your judgment. Then that's where you've got a really, really dangerous athlete, because they're willing to do what's needed, and they're not going to waver from that plan. But there's a little bit of groundwork you need to do before that becomes a reality, because we all know, like, if there's a little chink in their trust and you ask them to do something they don't agree with, or they don't want to do, or they're hesitant, or restraint against that can spiral out of control really badly if it's not managed.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of a situation with one of my clients who's on a photo shoot prep, and she needed to cut. She did like a big fitness games thing on the weekend, and she needed to drop weight then for a jiu-jitsu fight, like 3 kilos in a week. And she was like, yeah, I'm willing to do anything. And after the games, we had dropped like really low carb, and we were going to put, do the saunas and everything. And she slipped up on her diet like ever so slightly. But me as a coach, it's like, you can do one of two things. You can tell them to go do a shit ton of Stairmaster, or you say, no, realistically, like, let's just pull out of the fight, because the stress off the back of that is going to be too much. And it's like, that's where a lot of coaches fall down, is like, they will punish you with excessive amounts of cardio, and it's like, is that going to cause more harm in the long run? Is that stress going to impact the look? Is it going to make you hate the process and never want to prep again? And we talk about longevity all of the time, but it's like, someone going to finish a prep and then end up hating your coach. If they block you, Cal, on Instagram, they never hear from you again, because they've had such a mortifying process, and that's why I'm always so grateful that I've had the coach that I do, because you have that kind of compassion and empathy as well, to understand, okay, why is this going on? Why do you feel a certain way? And let's not like kill you over it, because ultimately that's going to make you worse, in the long run.
I think there's a big component from a coaching perspective where you need to take a step back and understand not just the immediate impact of a decision, it's what happens after that decision is made and that action has been taken. It's like, instead of them thinking, right, well, I'm just going to hammer you with 5 days of cardio and super low food now, because this is going to get you where you need to be by Friday, for example. What happens after Friday? What happens after they try and get back to their diet, but then they slip up and they're mentally not strong enough to get back, and they end up going off the rails for 2 weeks? Or it's just understanding the ramifications from all the decisions, and the best course of action relative to your judgment there, because it's often not as simple as, well, this is what you need to do, because X decision might create X problem after the decision's been made.
That's what I said. I said to her, I said, look, even if we made weight on Friday, I said, we still have our photo shoot in 5 weeks. What would have happened on Saturday or Sunday after you've done something so unsustainable like a photo shoot prep? There's no need to be doing all those kind of extreme things as well. So it is just having the kind of coaching abilities, and like you said, as a client, being able to communicate with your coach. And I'd like to think that not all coaches are scary. I've been surrounded by some of the best as well, so I'm lucky in that sense. But we're opening more conversations as well for people who are going through these things, to communicate with your coach, because ultimately, if you want to be the best athlete you can be, you need to do these things, rather than hide it and then suffer in the long run.
100%.
Yeah, it's scary, really, if you think about the impact that has, because as much as you are, like, you coach athletes and things like that, and athlete as yourself, for anybody listening, you have that journey in place. If you don't, we've already spoken about, if you don't have the right support network in place, it'll just crumble. They're the bricks that sort of build the foundations. So if that's not right, then it's just something that's going to be extremely difficult on the athlete and the coach, and the whole relationship. It's going to be hard to sort of repair. But sort of pulling it back to prep itself, Cal. So when you're looking at sort of the lead up to a show, you're talking maybe peak week, maybe 2 weeks before. Do you see an exasperation of people or athletes' mindsets? How do you manage that period, that acute period? Because especially when it comes to peaking athletes ready for show, all of those variables, especially stress on the body, can deter the look in such a different way. So how do you manage that specific time frame?
I think just preempting the process, what's ahead. So like having a structure and having a strategy before that week actually happens as to what you're going to be doing in the run of play league in stage. It's like the guys and girls that we've got going in stage in Sweden on Sunday, they all know what the agenda is for each given day. They all know what the agenda is for approximate like ranges of the dart on the given day, and then we'll just manipulate the smaller details when they check in the morning. They all know what the training schedule is. They all know what the output schedule is. They all know what, the run of play for each peak is. So they can kind of have a little bit of reassurance as to it's not an overwhelming factor of what's it going to make me do tomorrow, or what do I need to be prepared to do, or what happens if I don't have this, or, what happens if I can't do this because out of time. They've just planned the week in full, so they know everything can run like clockwork, and that removes a lot of stress. And that's just being, preempting things as a coach and laying the land there. Just it'll be the exact same as if you had an athlete who just got off stage and they want some kind of action plan as to what are the next 6 months look like in the off season, what are the next 6 weeks look like in terms of recovery. And they might have a little bit of downtime immediately post stage, but then they want to know some kind of clarity in terms of how that's going to look. And it's the exact same thing. It's just removing external stress, because the more that's left out in the open for the athlete to overthink, the more stress there is. So from a coaching perspective, there just needs to be, in that final week for peak week, it's a rigid structure. This is how it plays. We probably already trialed it already, because you might have done like a mock peak or some kind of setup where they might have done a regional first and now it's a pro qualifier, but they know the lay of the land there because they've already been through it. So it's just running it like clockwork again.
Yeah. And I suppose as a coach, Cal, like when it comes to peak week, you want things to be as predictable as possible. But have you ever been met with a situation where something kind of happens out of the blue and you've had to kind of manage that? Because I know, just as a kind of new kind of prep coach, I've kind of been met with those situations, and it can give you a little bit of stress. But how do you manage those things when they arise on peak week, and ultimately you only have, whether it's a weigh-in or, you're holding more fluid than needs to be? Like, how do you manage that in the moment and manage your stress alongside that?
Absorb the client stress yourself.
But you don't, you just have like a blank face. I'm like, how are you so calm? I see it on all the YouTube videos. It's like, you just are just absolutely fine.
Yeah, the thing is that, like, that's like for a lot of those situations, and some individuals are more are more easily rocked than others in terms of those higher stress environments. But like from a coaching perspective, you need to be the individual that has the calming tone on that environment, and you control the situation. It's like, right, this has happened. Let's think objectively and think critically here in terms of what needs to happen, how we're going to get there, and then we build an action plan. Because the coach that's scratching his head going, oh Jesus, this is a problem, isn't it? Then the client's going to be losing the plot. So like from a coaching perspective, that comes probably with experience as well. But you just need to be that calming effect on where their mindset is at, and just get them back to thinking objectively again. Like I remember when we did there's loads of times last year where the classic boys had to sauna and do stuff to make weight in the evening when things were messed around and timings were moved. Or like when pretty sure Ross was with me when we or was it Ross when we went to Finland for China and Momsey when they turned pro, and I think we came to see you in Manchester because our flights got cancelled twice. Remember?
Oh yeah, that was messy.
We woke up at 4 a.m. on the Friday to fly to Finland and got a text from Ryanair saying they'd cancelled the flights. Yeah. So we like the taxi was coming at like 4:30 or something. So like I had 3 athletes in the house: me, Hannah, Valentin, Momsey, Brightman, someone else. Like, we had there's loads of people with us. And obviously they're all like, right, what's the plan? What's my plan for the day? What do I eat? And I was like, right, we're going to get in the taxi. We're going to go to Manchester. We haven't booked any flights yet. And I was like, I'm going to find flights today from Manchester. We ended up flying from Manchester to somewhere in Spain.
It was Spain. And so it was like down and then all.
Slept the night in the airport in Spain, then flew to Finland.
Yeah, mental. But like you're gonna be met with that kind of situation, whether you're an amateur or a pro. Like remember when my car broke down on the way to I know it was only a regional, but to me it was a big deal. So
I remember that.
I was like that honestly stressed me out so much. But you're gonna be met with those things. So it's like I think Val in that situation he managed it really, really well. The stress. Well, he looked like he did anyway. I'd be an absolute mess, especially when you're going something as big as an Olympia invite. It's like I need to show up here at my best. There's no, it's not second or third. It's like I'm either winner or nothing at all. Oh yeah, that was interesting. Oh God.
No, I've done it. I think it was my second show, 2021. We had our tie just blew completely by the side of the road, due to register, due to get my tan in a matter of hours. I think I ended up walking there at one point. But I'm one of those people, Cal. You honestly, I flap. And I go one way or the other. I'll either stay really stoic and really fine, or I'll need peeling off the wall because I just go up like a rocket. And I think it's a skill and it's an art, managing sort of those sort of mindsets and that pressure. But do you see, is it the same sort of from amateur through to sort of chasing your pro status and then off to sort of pro shows and Olympia? Is the pressure consistent through that period, or does it ramp up, obviously with the goal ramping up, or is it equally as important and equally as challenging in some aspects with your athletes to manage them at each stage?
Yeah, the amateurs feel the pressure they create. But then when they get to pro status, then they see what real pressure is. So like when the stakes are higher, when there's more people watching, when there's prize money, when you're trying to qualify for the Olympia, then that environment is like everybody is out for themselves in that environment. Like, it's that's the cutthroat nature of the sport. Obviously there's a lot of camaraderie there, but it's like, no, I'm here to win. And everyone in that situation, you're going to get a lot of personalities, a lot of egos in that situation where there's a lot of pressure. But it's all relative. Like an amateur doing an NPC show, trying to win the first regional overall, or win their first regional class, or get a first call out, the pressure they feel is the exact same as if it was somebody that was stepping on stage at Olympia, because it's just goals. The how you perceive that in your mind, the magnitude is pretty much the same. It's just the level that you're at within your career as an athlete.
Yeah, and Chloe Pickford is one that kind of springs to mind in that sense. She only spoke about it on her stories there the other day, where she found that kind of I wouldn't even call it self-doubt, but it's like the fear of being at the bottom of the pile, knowing how far you have to go, can be so crippling. But I'm also in that instance as well. Like, I've just finished the Italy show, and it's like I feel like I'm so far away from being a top amateur, so like you said, it is all relative at the end of the day.
Yeah. I just think in that situation, because I've seen it so many times, like you're only one placing away from being that athlete that you want to be. You're only one opportunity away, one viewpoint with one of those head judges that go, actually, I like that look, I'm going to put them in the middle. And then when you get moved in the middle, everything starts to rush through your mind. Fucking hell, I can do it. I've finally done it. Even if you don't win the class, it's just the fact you've been compared in the middle. It's just, you just need a little bit of confirmation to push you on your way. And you're going to feel like that again. You're going to go back to the bottom of the pile in your mind again, but you're also going to get those moments to pick you back up, and you just got to grab onto those moments and use them.
Absolutely. Highly motivated after this. I'm like, road to pro, let's go.
Come on.
I'm already calling my YouTube series. Cal said I could turn pro. So
glute bridges in your sleep.
Oh God, no, absolutely. But it was incredible conversations. I know just everything that you are about, Cal, as a coach. It's been incredibly motivating for me. As an athlete, but also as a coach as well, and how I coach my athletes too. So hopefully a lot of people took so much from that for their journeys and their coaching skills as well. So hugely appreciate it. But Cal, where can everybody find you if they don't already know? Your books are probably full, and I don't know if you're even taking on any more of us difficult bikini competitors.
DMs will be closed.
I say that to every male coach that comes on. I'm like, how? I don't know how you do it.
I think Ross said he had a few spaces left for bikini athletes.
I don't know now. I'm an off really.
Yeah, it just pro coach on Instagram, and all those handles will come up. And then I have a small YouTube channel where we like vlog some of the trips and the show days and stuff, which is pretty cool. We've got a podcast called Pro Coach Radio, so hopefully the Google search engine optimization is good enough for us to come up at the top, but if it's not, then I better try harder.
The show reviews are really, really good, actually. And I think what we're doing as well with the bikini division is going through the amateur shows and shining the light on these people. And again, going back to what we spoke about, mindset, it's making us feel validated as well. And like our wins are being celebrated. And it's not just pro card, but it's like, no, actually, like what you did with the men's physique guys, are like the Ben Weeder, like celebrating how Alex Freshwater looked and how all these guys who came second and third looked as well. And that kind of boosts people's confidence as well and their abilities. So no, it's really, really good. But massively appreciate you coming on and taking the time to chat. And we shall speak very, very soon.